Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a room thick with smoke, oil and anticipation. The year is 1350 BCE, and you're standing just outside the private chambers of a wealthy Egyptian noblewoman in Thebes. The Nile has already given up its morning mist, the air is sharp with incense, and a servant carries a small alabaster jar in both hands as though it's treasure. Inside, the lady sits before a polished bronze mirror, her eyes already rimmed in thick, black kohl. The scent of crushed malachite hangs heavy, earthy, and metallic, and you realize she's painting her beauty with minerals pulled straight from the desert. You lean closer, though honestly you probably shouldn't, because if you inhale too much of that powdered galena, your lungs will protest in ways no priest can fix. It's the same paradox everywhere in history, beauty so desirable that people gladly swallowed its poison. So welcome to the deadly beauty secrets history tried to hide. Tonight you'll discover that behind every flawless face in the past was a recipe of chemicals, metals and practices that left scars on the body, and sometimes ended lives altogether. Some of them, disturbingly, are still lurking in products today. Before we dive in, if you're enjoying this descent into history's darker vanity, make sure you're subscribed for more stories like this. Drop your local time and location in the comments. I'm curious whether you're hearing about lead powder at midnight or radium cream at sunrise. And now, relax, settle in, and let's peel back the layers of rouge and powder that once turned beauty into a lethal gamble. You're tracing the earliest evidence of people actively choosing beauty despite knowing it carried a cost. Ancient Egyptians weren't just slapping mud on their faces, they had recipes. Their black kohl, so striking in tomb paintings, was made with galena, a lead ore ground to fine dust. Applied around the eyes, it protected against glare and flies. At least that's what the priests claimed, but at the same time it leached heavy metals into the skin. Imagine waking up every morning, dipping your stylus into a paste of crushed lead, and drawing thick lines across your eyelids. You'd look glamorous, but your nervous system would be ticking like a time bomb. Even the green pigment malachite, prized for its bold color, wasn't innocent. Miners pried it from deep seams of copper deposits, ground it, and mixed it into pastes. On the skin it glowed, but beneath, copper slowly accumulated in the body. A noblewoman might attend banquets gleaming with green eyelids while unknowingly nurturing chronic poisoning. Some medical papyri even record treatments for rashes and lesions, likely early symptoms of the cosmetics themselves. There's a grim comedy in that, the same scribes prescribing remedies for the problems caused by fashion. You wander further, and the scene shifts to Rome. Walk through a wealthy household in the 1st century CE, and you'll find women hunched over polished silver mirrors, applying cerussa, a paste of lead carbonate. This was the whitening mask of its day. Roman ideals praised pale skin as a sign of wealth, since only peasants tanned in the fields. So aristocrats coated their faces in this chalky white paint, hiding blemishes while slowly destroying their complexions. Behind the illusion of radiance, the skin cracked, peeled, and ulcerated. Yet when sores appeared, physicians recommended, you guessed it, more cerussa to cover the damage. It was the ancient equivalent of a concealer that actually caused the very spots you wanted to hide. A Roman satirist once quipped that you could tell a woman had been beautiful the night before, but by morning her face had melted into streaks of white paste on the pillows. You picture the awkward breakfast conversations, husbands staring at linen smeared with toxic chalk, yet still demanding their wives mask up again for the day. It was a cycle of illusion so common it passed unquestioned, even as it ruined lives. Move forward into medieval Europe, and the obsession doesn't fade, it mutates. By the 13th century, women had access to arsenic powders marketed as safe whiteners. Arsenic was ground, sifted and dusted across the skin to achieve that same ghostly high-status pallor. Unlike tanning oils which announced you worked outdoors, this deadly dust screamed leisure and wealth. Trouble is, arsenic penetrates the skin, wrecks the nerves, and causes hair loss. Imagine trying to maintain a flawless look while your eyebrows literally fall out. Not exactly the timeless beauty hack you hoped for. And then came the Renaissance, when Venetian ceruse took center stage. This concoction blended white lead and vinegar into a paste so popular that even Queen Elizabeth famously used it. Portraits show her pale face glowing like porcelain, but beneath the paint her skin likely festered. Some reports suggest her skin was so scarred by smallpox and cosmetics that she relied entirely on layers of ceruse to appear queenly. The irony is sharp, a monarch praised for timeless beauty, whose very mask was eating her alive. Her courtiers copied the look, eager to share in the illusion, until half the court looked like a porcelain army marching slowly toward organ failure. Lip color wasn't safer. Throughout history, rouges and lip stains often contained cinnabar, a mercury-based mineral. Grind it finely, smear it across lips, and voila, a deep, crimson mouth, kissable, sure, survivable, questionable. Mercury exposure caused tremors, mood swings, and eventually organ damage. Some scholars even speculate that the exaggerated nervous tics described in Renaissance courtiers might not have been quirks of personality at all but symptoms of mercury poisoning. So when you imagine a duke dramatically gesturing with twitching hands, you might be watching the physical cost of his crimson lips. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Europe's beauty regimes leaned into outright bizarre territory. Hair was lightened with caustic lye solutions, sometimes mixed with human urine, and then sunbaked to fix the blonde effect. It was painful, it scorched scalps, and it smelled like a failed chemistry experiment, but for fashionable women in Venice, golden hair was worth it. Some accounts even describe women sitting on rooftops with wide-brimmed hats, the crown cut out to expose hair while shading the face, cooking their scalps in the hope of emerging more desirable. You picture the awkward laughter, the stink, the neighbors pretending not to gag. Perfumes too could kill softly. The musk and floral scents weren't the issue, it was the carriers and additives. Some included mercury salts, arsenic or powdered pearls. Breathing these mixtures in daily was a kind of aromatic suicide, a sweet-smelling death if you want to be poetic, though your lungs would strongly disagree. Cosmetic rouge powders in the 18th century often doubled down with both lead and mercury, a combination so destructive that it left many with neurological disorders. Yet portraits of French courtiers still show glowing cheeks and powdered faces, as if nothing was wrong. It's the classic case of culture overriding common sense. When beauty meant status, risk was simply part of the package. And then wigs entered the picture, massive, powdered, perfumed constructions that hid baldness. Baldness itself was often caused by syphilis or by mercury treatments for syphilis. So there's another loop of irony. To cure one problem, people dosed themselves with mercury, lost their hair, and then hid it with wigs that demanded more toxic powders. It was a spiral of vanity and medicine gone wrong, all while fashion demanded bigger, whiter, more elaborate hairpieces, stacked high with ribbons and even small cages holding live birds. That's right, nothing says toxic chic like balancing a finch on your mercury-dusted wig. Corsets, meanwhile, weren't chemical but mechanical torture. Women cinched themselves until they fainted, lungs compressed, ribs deformed, and organs displaced. Doctors of the 19th century noted livers with permanent grooves where ribs had squeezed them. The fainting couch wasn't just a stylish piece of furniture, it was functional, because women genuinely collapsed from lack of oxygen. But in portraits and soirees, the tiny waists looked divine, and that was worth all the dizziness. The Victorian period didn't loosen the grip of danger, instead it added belladonna drops, which women used to dilate their pupils for a doe-eyed look. Belladonna, also known as deadly nightshade, blurred vision, and increased heart rate. A single drop too many could stop the heart. Imagine women blinking prettily at parties while their optic nerves quietly cried for help. Ammonia washes, another Victorian favorite, scalded skin under the guise of deep cleaning. If you've ever had your eyes water at household ammonia, imagine it on your cheeks daily. Not exactly spa day material. By the early 20th century, new science promised progress but delivered fresh horrors. Enter radium beauty creams, advertised as rejuvenating and revitalizing. These products literally glowed in the dark. Women slathered their faces in radioactive lotion, believing it would banish wrinkles. Some companies even bottled radium-infused water as health tonics. The results were catastrophic: rotting jaws, cancer, systemic radiation poisoning. The infamous radium girls, who painted watch dials with luminous paint, suffered grotesque injuries, yet the products remained on shelves for years. Consumers admired their glowing complexions, without realizing it was the light of decay. Hollywood glamour in the 1930s and 40s also hid risks. Pancake makeup designed for film contained heavy metals. Hair dyes leaned on coal tar derivatives that caused burns and allergic reactions. Chemical perms sometimes burned scalps so badly that clumps of hair fell out, leaving permanent scars. Yet silver screen actresses appeared flawless, and millions of women copied their regimes. Fast forward, and you'll see the legacy continues. Modern nail polishes still contain formaldehyde derivatives. Skin lightening creams in some countries still hide mercury, and hair relaxers have been linked to serious health risks. The names of the toxins may have changed, but the pattern remains. Beauty sells best when danger is hidden just beneath the surface. All of this makes you reconsider that alabaster jar you saw in Thebes. The noblewoman's servants smiled as they applied it, believing it shielded her from evil and made her radiant. They didn't know they were watching a slow-acting curse, a chemical spell cast in powder. From ancient malachite to modern creams, the story repeats. Beauty, so desirable, always carries a hidden cost. You're already knee-deep in ancient powders, pastes and creams, so let's walk straight into the heart of one of history's most famous beauty regimes, ancient Egypt. The obsession with cosmetics here wasn't just about vanity, it was about ritual, medicine, and divine power. Yet for all its sacred associations, the ingredients were steadily poisoning the very people who believed they were touching the gods. Imagine yourself along the Nile around 1500 BCE. The river gleams under the midday sun, fishermen haul in their nets, and inside a noble household, jars of pigment are opened like treasure. Cosmetic production in Egypt was practically an industry. Excavations have uncovered pallets, mixing sticks, and tiny jars carved from alabaster or faience, still holding traces of pigment after thousands of years. The contents: lead sulfide for that dark black coal, malachite for shimmering green, red ochre for lips and cheeks. The packaging alone radiates luxury, but the real story is what these powders did once they were applied. Kohl was the superstar. Egyptians lined their eyes, not only for beauty but also as spiritual armor. The eye of Horus symbol wasn't abstract, it was believed that lining your eyes mirrored divine protection. Some modern researchers even found that trace amounts of lead compounds in kohl may have stimulated mild immune responses, potentially reducing eye infections from dirty Nile water. But here's the catch: those same lead compounds also seeped into the body. A few micrograms a day might fight bacteria, but decades of application built up toxicity in bones and organs. That beautiful line of black came with a hidden bill. You glance at a wealthy woman's face as she leans close to her polished bronze mirror. Her servant dips a reed stick into a mixture of galena and fat, dragging it carefully along her lash line. She blinks. The kohl smudges but looks dramatic under the desert sun. She believes it wards off the evil eye, but in truth, her liver is quietly absorbing the damage. You wonder how many elegant women of Thebes, Memphis, or Amarna carried headaches, tremors, or premature deaths to their tombs because of this beauty. And malachite, that green copper ore, was no safer. Egyptians adored green, associated with rebirth and fertility, so green eyelids became fashionable. Malachite powder, mixed with animal fat, made the eyes glimmer, but copper toxicity isn't subtle. Long-term exposure can cause vomiting, organ damage, even neurological issues. Yet when you see the bust of Nefertiti with her famous painted eyes, you realize the allure was irresistible. Who wouldn't risk a little nausea for a look that could become immortal in stone? Cosmetics weren't just for women. Men too rimmed their eyes with kohl, and even children sometimes wore it. Pharaohs, high priests, soldiers all used makeup as both fashion and function. The army believed kohl protected eyes from the desert glare. Soldiers lined their lids before campaigns, thinking it was as practical as a helmet. It was in a way, but no helmet seeps toxins into your bloodstream daily. Perfume added another deadly layer. Egyptians pioneered perfumery by steeping flowers, herbs, and resins in fats and oils. These oils were luxurious, but some were spiked with minerals or preservatives that included toxic additives. Cleopatra herself was said to have doused her sails in perfume so strong it announced her arrival before she appeared. The Romans later mocked Egyptian love of scents as excessive, but the real tragedy is that some of those mixtures, especially when adulterated with lead or arsenic to preserve them, were silently harmful. Then there was henna, used for coloring hair and nails. On its own, henna wasn't particularly toxic, but later additives, like copper salts to fix the color, introduced hazards. Imagine painting your nails for a wedding ceremony and ending up with cracked, inflamed fingers. The beauty manuals didn't advertise that part. The deeper irony is that Egyptians believed cosmetics held healing powers. Medical papyri described recipes of crushed minerals, fats, and honey applied as eye salves. Some might have had antiseptic effects, but just as often, the cure was also the cause. It's like using bleach as mouthwash because it kills bacteria. Technically true, but you won't be around long to enjoy the results. You can picture the scene at a bustling marketplace in Thebes. Vendors call out, offering tiny jars of pigment, blocks of resin, and perfume sealed in animal bladders. Shoppers crowd, servants haggle, and everyone accepts that beauty requires these purchases. There's no FDA, no warning labels, no side effects may include death. You buy what looks good, use what others praise, and hope the gods smile on your choices. Let's not forget wigs. Egyptians shaved their heads for cleanliness, then wore elaborate wigs made from human hair, sheep's wool, or plant fibers. These wigs were perfumed with oils, sometimes with ingredients like lead-based preservatives, to prevent decay. People wore them daily under the blazing sun, sweating toxins directly into their skin. But to appear bald in public was shameful, so wigs remained essential, even when they caused rashes and sores. And jewelry, yes, even beauty and adornment had dangers. Green copper jewelry corroded and left toxic residues on the skin. Some amulets were coated in lead-based glazes. To wear beauty against your skin was to risk absorbing poison with every bead of sweat. Imagine sitting at a feast. The noble guests shine with polished eyes, painted lips, perfumed wigs, and glittering jewelry. They look radiant, in flickering torchlight, sipping wine, listening to harpists. Yet, the room is a quiet chamber of slow poison. Every breath carries incense smoke mixed with resin and minerals. Every touch of pigment seeps through pores. Every sip of preserved wine contains lead from amphora linings. You realize the banquet hall is as much a toxic cloud as a celebration. The strangest part, some of these practices lasted millennia. Even after Greece and Rome conquered Egypt, the traditions of kohl and powders spread out. Roman women took up Egyptian beauty hacks, convinced they were eternal. By then the poisons had already passed through generations, carried across empires, and seeded into Europe's later beauty culture. You might ask, did anyone notice? The answer is yes, sort of. There are records of ancient physicians warning against overuse of cosmetics. Some medical texts from Greece reference skin lesions caused by white lead, but the warnings were drowned by culture. Beauty, status, and divine association shouted louder than whispers of caution. After all, if Cleopatra or Nefertiti could wear these substances and still command armies and lovers, who dared argue? And here's the uncomfortable reminder: some of the very same compounds never really left us. Lead was banned from modern cosmetics only in recent decades, but traces still turn up in cheaper products worldwide. Mercury-laced skin lighteners are still sold illegally. The shadow of ancient Egyptian coal jars stretches into your own bathroom cabinet if you're not careful. So as you watch that Egyptian noblewoman finish her routine, blinking through thick black coal, shimmering with malachite, perfumed with oils, you see both her triumph and her tragedy. She looks divine, perhaps even untouchable, but her beauty is slowly shortening her life. The alabaster jars, so prized they'd be buried with her in her tomb, aren't really treasures at all. They're elegant little bombs, waiting to detonate over decades of daily use. And this is where the real story begins, not just in Egypt, but in every culture that followed, each adding its own dangerous recipe to the mix. Because beauty from its earliest formulations has always been a kind of gamble. You win admiration in the short term, but you pay with your health in the long term, and somehow, even knowing this, people have always been willing to roll the dice. You leave the warm sands of Egypt and step into the tiled courtyards of Rome, where fountains splash and bronze mirrors catch the Mediterranean sun. Beauty here isn't just ritual, it's theater. Roman women are expected to shine like statues of Venus, flawless and pale, no matter how much their skin protests under the daily assault of pastes and powders. The marketplace smells of olive oil, fish sauce and perfume all at once, and down a side street a cosmetics seller displays little boxes of powders that promise to transform any face into a marble masterpiece. The star of the Roman beauty kit was Sarissa, basic lead carbonate. Chemists of the day manufactured it deliberately, strips of lead suspended over pots of vinegar, left to corrode until flakes of white crust formed. Those flakes were scraped off, ground and blended into creams. If you've ever heard that Roman innovation shaped the ancient world, well, here's one innovation that shaped faces into luminous masks while quietly eating away at the body beneath. You walk into a wealthy woman's atrium, where a maid stirs a bowl of this paste. The mixture is chalky, slightly acidic from the vinegar, and it smells faintly metallic. She pats it across her mistress's cheeks, layering it thickly. The result is a uniform whiteness that hides freckles, scars and sun damage. Pale skin meant status proof you weren't out harvesting grain under the sun, but rather enjoying leisure indoors. For senators' wives and highborn matrons, whiteness wasn't just attractive, it was social currency. But the cost: Lead is a thief in the bloodstream. It replaces calcium in bones, disrupts nerves and damages kidneys. Over time, women who wore Sarissa daily developed everything from chronic fatigue to paralysis. Skin itself rebelled. The paste caused sores and lesions, which only led to more Sarissa to cover the damage. It's the definition of a vicious cycle. You can almost hear a Roman woman mutter, "I can't go out, my skin looks terrible," while smearing on more of the very paste, causing the disaster. Writers of the time noticed. The poet Ovid, who loved to give cheeky advice on seduction, warned women that painted faces might melt in the heat or smear at banquets. One satirist joked that when a fashionable lady wept, her tears ran white down her cheeks like chalk melting in rain. Another claimed that a husband could never know his wife's real appearance until morning when the mask of Sarissa had rubbed off on the pillows. These jokes sound funny until you remember that the mask was actually toxic sludge. It didn't stop with skin whitening. Romans adored rouge to add back color. Since Sarissa turned the complexion ghostly, they used red ochre, but also cinnabar, mercury sulfide ground to a bright vermilion. Cinnabar had been mined in Spain and used for centuries, but miners often died young, their lungs destroyed by inhaling the dust. That danger didn't stop it from being brushed onto lips and cheeks. Roman women walked around with smiles as bright as rubies, powered by mercury. Perfumes were another deadly indulgence. Imported resins from Arabia, myrrh, frankincense, and exotic spices were dissolved in oils. Nothing inherently wrong there, until merchants cut costs by bulking scents with additives. Some recipes included arsenic powders or lead-based stabilizers. A Roman banquet might dazzle the senses with garlands of flowers, platters of oysters, and fountains of perfume sprayed across the room. But every breath drawn through that sweet haze might be laced with toxins. Hair, too, was a battlefield. Roman fashion adored blonde hair, and since most Italians were naturally dark, women bleached their hair with concoctions of vinegar, ashes, and sometimes lye. The caustic mixture burned scalps, and long-term use thinned hair so badly that wigs became essential. Enter the bustling wig trade. Merchants imported blonde hair from Gaul and Germany, turning conquered tribes into suppliers of Roman glamour. Some wigs were even treated with minerals to preserve them, minerals that irritated skin, creating rashes along the hairline. And for those who couldn't afford imported wigs, sheep's wool, dyed blonde. Imagine a woman adjusting her wool wig in a hot Roman bath, sweat trickling down her forehead, dye running into her eyes, hardly the vision of Venus she hoped for. It wasn't only women, men too indulged in beauty. Some senators used Sarissa to smooth their complexions, while others dyed their grey hair with concoctions of lead and vinegar to appear youthful. There are accounts of emperors obsessed with appearances, commanding special cosmetics from physicians. Julius Caesar himself was mocked for obsessively grooming, plucking stray hairs, and possibly using early hair restoration concoctions. Masculine beauty demanded its own poisons. The irony is sharp. Rome, so proud of its engineering, aqueducts, and military discipline, built its image of beauty on substances that destroyed its own elite. You imagine a senator's wife at a feast, her face glowing white with Sarissa, lips scarlet with cinnabar, hair gleaming blonde from vinegar bleaching. She reclines on a couch, sipping wine from a lead-glazed goblet. Every part of her beauty and lifestyle, from her skin paste to her cup, is quietly dosing her with metals that shorten her life. And yes, even the wine was a culprit. Romans sweetened wine with sappa, a syrup boiled down in lead vessels, which leached the metal into the drink. Combine that with cosmetics, and you've got a society marinating its elite in heavy metals from both inside and out. Some historians have even speculated that chronic lead poisoning contributed to Rome's decline. Though it's debated, it's hard not to imagine those daily doses having some effect. But again, did they know? Medical writers occasionally hinted. Pliny the Elder mentioned harmful effects of lead, though he also praised its usefulness. Galen, centuries later, wrote about skin disorders caused by cosmetics. Yet the knowledge never outweighed the desire. Beauty was about status, and status was survival in a society obsessed with appearances. If a paste killed slowly, it was worth it, because an unpainted face killed your social standing much faster. You pause at a Roman bathhouse, steam swirling around tiled walls. Women chatter as they reapply powders, rouge, and oils after bathing. Merchants circulate, offering the latest mixtures. You hear one woman laugh about her neighbor's complexion, rotting under her Sarissa while boasting that hers looks flawless. In reality, both are slowly being poisoned, and both will keep buying the same jars. That's the chilling power of beauty culture. It persuades people to embrace what harms them, because the alternative appearing unfashionable is worse. Some Romans pushed back. Philosophers like Seneca mocked the obsession, praising natural simplicity. Early Christians condemned cosmetics as vanity, yet the powders and pastes endured, buried in tombs, recorded in household lists, and even shipped across the empire as luxury exports. Roman Britain, far from the Mediterranean, still yielded cosmetic kits in excavations, proof that vanity traveled even to the windswept edges of empire. You realize that Rome inherited Egypt's toxic traditions and passed them on again, like a baton in a deadly relay. Cerussa would reappear in medieval Europe under new names. Cinnabar would tint Renaissance lips, and bleaching hair would plague fashionistas for centuries. Rome didn't invent these poisons, but it normalized them across a continent. So as you watch a matron at her mirror, adjusting her chalky mask before stepping out into the forum, you can't help thinking, she looks like a statue of Venus, but she's really a monument to human stubbornness. Beauty promises immortality, but here it only speeds decay, and the cruelest twist. Centuries later, archaeologists will admire her cosmetic jars in museums, marveling at their elegance, while forgetting the women who paid the price with their health. You step out of marble Rome and into the stone streets of medieval Europe, where the bells toll from cathedral towers, and the marketplace bustles with noise. The scene feels harsher, darker, and colder than Egypt or Rome, yet the pursuit of beauty persists, only now it carries the hushed tone of secrecy, whispers and recipes passed in coded language. Cosmetics never disappeared, they merely adapted, shaped by superstition, religion, and the ever-present risk of scandal. In the medieval world, pale skin was still the gold standard. Fairness meant nobility, leisure, and purity. To be tanned was to declare yourself a peasant, forced to labor under the sun, and so, women of status, and those who desperately wished to appear of status, turned to powders and lotions designed to bleach the skin, the most infamous, arsenic-based powders. Walk into the chamber of a noblewoman around the 13th century, and you'd see it: a polished silver mirror, a servant grinding minerals with a mortar and pestle, and a puff of pale dust rising as a brush swirls across a dish. The dust isn't flour or chalk, it's arsenic. Applied carefully, it gives the face a ghostly uniform pallor. The cheeks glow faintly, like ivory under candlelight. It's the look of refinement, the sign that you belong indoors, protected and pampered. But you know better. You know every particle of that powder is whispering poison into her pores. Arsenic doesn't take long to announce itself. Red, inflamed patches appear on the skin, followed by sores. Hair thins, fingernails grow brittle, and beneath the surface, the nervous system falters. Imagine trying to hold a goblet at a feast while your hands tremble, the very symptom of the powder you applied to look perfect for that feast. Of course, women weren't always told they were buying arsenic. Recipes circulated in books of secrets, collections of beauty and household remedies. A lady might read that a face wash to cleanse blemishes required vinegar, chalk, and a special dust from apothecaries. The apothecary, eager for coin, would sell ground arsenic as if it were medicine. Everyone played their part: the author who praised it, the seller who provided it, the lady who applied it, and everyone ignored the way skin peeled and health declined. In some courts, the look of pallor was pushed to extremes. Chroniclers describe noble women appearing almost spectral, their faces unnaturally white, lips faintly tinted with plant dyes or crushed cochineal. The contrast was striking under candlelight, but the cost was unmistakable. By the time these women reached middle age, their faces bore scars, their teeth loosened, and their health faltered. Yet they continued, because to appear without paint was to appear weak, unfashionable, or worse, poor. And it wasn't only powders. Medieval beauty culture reached for strange concoctions. Mercury appeared again, disguised in ointments meant to smooth the skin. Vinegar washes were spiked with toxic salts. Some manuals even recommended washing the face with mixtures of quicklime and lead, claiming it would soften blemishes. If the sting felt unbearable, that was supposedly proof it was working. You can almost hear the rationalizations whispered in chambers. Yes, my skin burns, but that means the magic is setting in. Or, if my lips sting from the rouge, it must be a strong recipe. Pain was reframed as progress, suffering as sacrifice. Beauty was rarely a joy, it was a grim endurance test. The role of religion complicates things further. The church often condemned cosmetics as vanity and sin. Preachers thundered against painted faces, warning that women who masked their God-given looks were deceivers, temptresses, or even witches. Yet wealthy patrons of the church often ignored these warnings, quietly indulging in powders and washes. The contradiction was clear. The same noble women funding chapels might also sit at their mirrors each morning, applying the very poisons priests railed against from pulpits. This tension created secrecy. Recipes were disguised as medical treatments. A lotion for the skin wasn't vanity, it was a cure for blemishes. A whitening powder wasn't fashion, it was healing discoloration. Behind these euphemisms, cosmetics thrived, even as moralists denounced them. And of course there were the folk remedies, some just as dangerous. In villages, women mixed concoctions of ground bones, vinegar, and herbs to lighten skin. Some burned herbs that produced toxic smoke, inhaled in hopes of purifying complexion. Others experimented with animal fats mixed with metals, creating creams that corroded skin almost instantly. Word of mouth carried these recipes across generations, embedding danger in the very fabric of tradition. Consider hair. Medieval Europe adored golden tones, echoing Roman and Venetian fashions. Women lightened their hair with washes of lye or ashes, sometimes combined with stale urine, then sat in the sun with their heads exposed. The scalp burned, the smell was unbearable, and hair often snapped or fell out, but golden strands glittered in candlelight, and that was enough. Bald spots could be covered with veils or hoods, less shameful than unfashionable hair. Jewelry and adornments weren't innocent either. Brightly colored glass beads were sometimes coated with lead-based glazes, which flaked onto skin with sweat. Dyes used to tint fabrics included toxic compounds that transferred to the skin during long wear. The line between beauty and slow poisoning blurred everywhere. What's striking is how little choice many women felt they had. In a world where marriage, alliances, and survival often depended on appearance, cosmetics weren't frivolous. They were tools of power, even if they came with hidden costs. A noblewoman whose skin looked smooth and pale might secure a better marriage, gain influence at court, or protect her children's futures. If that meant shaving years her own life, the calculation still made sense in the brutal arithmetic of medieval society. Think of Elizabeth of Bavaria, wife of Charles VI of France. Chronicles describe her as strikingly pale and admired for her looks, though constant illness shadowed her later years. Or consider noble women who used arsenic, not just for beauty but also in desperate schemes to harm rivals. The boundary between cosmetic and poison blurred so much that the same jars could be used for rouge or for murder. And the men, they weren't entirely innocent. Some lords powdered their faces lightly or used tinted waters to refresh their skin, especially in Italy and France. Knights, returning from crusades, brought back tales of exotic cosmetics, which trickled into noble culture. Perfumed oils, often spiked with toxic minerals, became status symbols for men as well as women. The danger was shared, though rarely acknowledged. Imagine attending a medieval feast. The hall glows with torchlight, banners flutter, and the air stinks of roasted meat, sweat, and incense. At the high table, noble women dazzle with pale, powdered faces, jeweled veils, and golden hair. Courtiers murmur about their beauty, but you notice their hands shake slightly when they lift goblets. You see faint sores near the edges of their lips, half hidden under rouge. You hear whispers of headaches, fainting spells, or mysterious deaths in households. The truth hangs in the smoky air. The beauty on display is slowly consuming the bodies beneath. It's easy, centuries later, to shake your head and ask why would they do this, but then you glance at your own era's bathroom shelves and realize the same impulse remains. Labels promise miracles, side effects whispered in tiny print. A bottle of cream in 1350 might say, for a noble complexion. A bottle today says, anti-aging serum. The language changes, the risk doesn't vanish. And so as you leave that medieval hall, you carry with you the image of pale, ghostly faces glowing in candlelight, faces painted with powders of arsenic, mercury, and lime. They seem untouchable, otherworldly, almost divine. Yet you know that under the mask the skin is scarred, the body weakened, the life shortened. Beauty has always been a mask, and in the Middle Ages that mask was carved out of poison. The candles of the medieval hall fade, and now you find yourself beneath the vaulted ceilings of the Renaissance. The air is perfumed with rose water, lute strings drift faintly through a palace corridor, and everywhere you look, faces gleam like painted porcelain. This is the age of grandeur, of discovery, of genius, and of beauty pushed to its most dangerous extremes. If the Middle Ages toyed with arsenic powders, the Renaissance embraced a superstar poison that would define the look of a generation. Venetian cerulean Imagine standing in the boudoir of a Venetian noblewoman around 1570. A maid kneels before a chest of small glass jars, pulling one out with the care you might reserve for gold. The paste inside is thick, white and creamy, its ingredients, white lead mixed with vinegar, the perfect formula to smooth across a face until it shines pale and flawless. To Renaissance eyes this wasn't just attractive, it was divine. Pale skin symbolized wealth, nobility and an almost ethereal purity. Tanned skin meant labor in fields, pallor meant luxury, refinement and superiority. Ceruse became the ultimate cosmetic. Queens, courtesans, and ladies at court slathered it onto their cheeks daily, and at the very top the most famous user, Elizabeth I of England. Portraits of her show a face gleaming with pale brilliance, lips tinted faintly red, hair arranged in a fiery halo. Admirers called her the Virgin Queen, her beauty eternal, her image nearly godlike. But behind the glow of Ceruse her skin was scarred by smallpox, riddled with blemishes, and likely corroded by years of lead paste. Some accounts suggest her face was so damaged that she wore layers of ceruse as a literal mask, covering wounds that would otherwise have exposed her mortality. The tragedy is sharp. Elizabeth's carefully painted image cemented her power, yet the very tool that made her immortal in art was slowly destroying her body and life. And still, her courtiers imitated her. Women across Europe begged merchants for Venetian ceruse, smuggled from Italy at outrageous prices. Recipes circulated widely, some recommending mixing ceruse with egg whites to make it smoother, others suggesting herbs to disguise the vinegar's sting. No matter the variation, the foundation was the same: lead. Lead poisoning is insidious. It creeps into the bloodstream, erodes the nervous system, and causes tremors, headaches, and eventually organ failure. On the skin, ceruse caused rashes, ulcers, and cracks. But what did women do when sores appeared? They applied more ceruse to cover them. The cycle never ended. Blemishes caused by ceruse covered by more ceruse, until the skin beneath was a ruin no one dared expose. Lips, too, demanded color. Crimson mouths signaled vitality and allure, but natural dyes from plants were rarely strong enough to hold, so women turned to mercury-based cinnabar and vermilion. These pigments glowed brilliantly in candlelight, producing lips that looked almost like jewels. Yet every smile carried mercury into the body. Chronic exposure produced tremors, the so-called hatter's shakes, later associated with mercury poisoning. Some contemporaries mocked courtiers for their twitching gestures, mistaking them for affectation or eccentricity. In truth, they were symptoms of chemical poisoning. Rouge also came from dangerous sources. Some powders were tinted with carmine, derived from crushed cochineal insects, which was relatively harmless, but others contained mixtures of mercury, arsenic, or even sulfur to produce deeper reds. The irony: what was meant to give a healthy glow often created the opposite: sallow skin beneath the rouge, hidden by yet another layer of rouge. Hair, as always, demanded attention. Golden locks were the pinnacle of Renaissance beauty, echoing ideals from classical myths. Women bleached hair with lye vinegar and urine, sitting under the sun for hours with elaborate hats that shaded the face while exposing strands to the light. The scalp burned, the hair weakened, but the results were considered worth the agony. Portraits of Venetian women show flowing blonde hair cascading over jeweled gowns, symbols of allure and prestige. You can almost smell the caustic tang of lye drifting from their heads as they smiled at painters. Perfumes added another layer of danger. Renaissance perfumers blended oils, flowers, and herbs, but stabilizers often included toxic metals. Musk, ambergris, and civet were precious, but cheaper perfumes were bulked out with compounds that irritated skin and lungs. Imagine a court ball where every noblewoman is doused in perfume, the air heavy with sweetness. Beneath that sweetness, trace toxins swirl, breathed in with every laugh and whispered secret. Wigs and adornments also joined the arsenal. Though less elaborate than the towering perukes of the 17th century, Renaissance wigs still relied on powders and preservatives that contained mercury and lead. Jewelry, too, sometimes carried toxins in glazes or dyes. A noblewoman could be poisoned not only by what she painted on her skin, but also by what she wore against it. And then there were the secret recipes, the whispered miracle cures for complexion. One manuscript recommended bathing the face in mercury to remove blemishes. Another suggested a lotion of vinegar and lead to erase freckles. Some even advised swallowing small doses of arsenic as a treatment for a luminous complexion. The logic: if it paled the skin externally, perhaps it worked from within. The results: vomiting, wasting, and slow death. but the promise of beauty was strong enough to make even poison seem reasonable. Consider the story of Isabella d'Este, the Marchioness of Mantua, praised as one of the most beautiful women of her age. Letters between her and apothecaries reveal constant requests for powders and creams, desperate efforts to maintain her legendary looks. Though not all her recipes survive, many included ingredients known to be toxic. Imagine her at her writing desk, penning letters in elegant script, while her own cosmetics quietly gnawed at her health. Men weren't absent from this pursuit. Courtiers dyed their hair, perfumed their bodies, and sometimes powdered their faces lightly. Baldness was common, often hidden under wigs preserved with mercury. Even artists, tasked with painting patrons, sometimes commented on the masks their subjects wore, complexions so uniformly white they seemed unreal. But to Renaissance elites, looking unreal was the point. Beauty was not meant to be natural, it was meant to be divine, untouchable, larger than life. The irony is breathtaking. The Renaissance celebrated discovery, science and progress, yet its most glamorous figures poisoned themselves daily in pursuit of beauty. In art, they appear immortal, glowing in portraits by Titian, Bronzino, or Holbein. But behind the canvas was the quiet truth. Their bodies were battlegrounds, their skin scarred, their nerves frayed, their organs failing. Even in death, the poisons lingered. Archaeologists testing hair from Renaissance burials have found high levels of lead and mercury, proof that cosmetics left their mark in the body long after life ended. The very earth remembers the cost of beauty. And yet, as you watch a Renaissance lady finish her toilette, smoothing ceruse across her cheeks, painting her lips vermilion, and arranging her golden locks, you realize she feels triumphant. She has conquered blemishes, commanded admiration, and stepped into the role society demands. She doesn't know, or doesn't care, that her mirror reflects not just beauty, but doom. It's a story repeated again and again, beauty promising power while secretly robbing health, and the Renaissance, for all its brilliance, proved that even the most enlightened age can cling to the darkest secrets when vanity holds the brush. The candles of the Renaissance ball gutter out, and now you find yourself in a smaller, dimly lit chamber. The air is heavy with the smell of wax, rose water, and something metallic that doesn't quite belong. A lady sits at her table, not applying her usual ceruse foundation but reaching instead for something smaller, darker and more dangerous: lip stains and rouge. This section of history's beauty cabinet is no less toxic than the pale masks of ceruse. It just concentrates the poison into tiny, seductive bursts of color. Humans have always craved red lips. Across cultures, crimson mouths meant vitality, fertility, and allure, but nature rarely provided the intensity society demanded. Berries, beetroot, and plant dyes offered faint tints, but they faded too quickly under heat, sweat, or candlelight. Women and men alike wanted permanence, something that stayed bright long into the night, and permanence, in those centuries, usually meant poison. One of the most common solutions was cinnabar, also known as vermilion, mined as a deep red mineral. Cinnabar is mercury sulfide. Ground to a fine powder, it produced a pigment so dazzling it seemed almost alive. Applied to lips or cheeks, it glowed in dim light, commanding attention at feasts, courts, and theaters. But cinnabar dust is no innocent blush. It leaches mercury into the body, accumulating over years until tremors, mood swings, and organ damage set in. Imagine a young courtier in Renaissance Italy, her lips painted bright vermilion, as she flirts across the room. Her gestures are animated, her laughter sharp, but watch closely. Her hand trembles slightly when she lifts her goblet. Her words sometimes falter. At first, others dismiss it as excitement. Later, whispers begin. She is unstable, she is sickly, she is cursed. In truth, her symptoms are simply mercury poisoning disguised as eccentricity. Cinnabar wasn't the only pigment. Some recipes called for red lead, a compound known since antiquity. Red lead was cheaper than cinnabar and produced a warm, orange-red tint, but it carried the same dangers as white lead ceruse: skin irritation, sores, and systemic poisoning. Women dusted it on their cheeks, painted it across lips, and sometimes even blended it with vinegar to create liquid rouges. Over time, their lips cracked, ulcerated, and became dependent on more paint to conceal the damage. Other recipes introduced arsenic-based rouges. Ground arsenic mixed with cochineal or other dyes created brilliant pinks. Applied to the cheeks, it gave a delicate flush, exactly the opposite of the ghostly pallor caused by lead foundation. But the irony was vicious. Arsenic not only poisoned from within, but also destroyed the very skin it was supposed to beautify. Sores and swelling appeared, hidden beneath fresh layers of rouge. For those who wanted to avoid minerals, there was carmine, a pigment made by crushing cochineal insects imported from the New World. This pigment, still used in cosmetics today, was relatively safe compared to mercury or arsenic. But carmine was expensive, making it a luxury for elites. The cheaper, more toxic alternatives remained popular among those who couldn't afford imported dyes. In other words, the poor died faster, and the wealthy died slower, but nearly everyone courted danger. The obsession wasn't limited to women. Men at court, especially in France, sometimes tinted their lips lightly or powdered their cheeks to keep up with fashion. Courtiers competing for attention at Versailles or in Italian palaces needed every edge, and a faint flush could mean the difference between being noticed or ignored. The language of beauty was universal, and so too was the poison. Consider the scene of a grand masque in 16th century England. Torches flare, music swells, and courtiers whirl in dance. Everywhere you look, lips gleam red, some vermilion, some arsenic pink, some faintly stained with carmine. From a distance the effect is mesmerizing. Up close though, you notice cracked lips bleeding under the paint, swollen gums and teeth stained by mineral residues. Yet no one dares appear without color. To show bare lips would be to admit fatigue, illness or poverty. Better to poison yourself and look lively than to appear natural and risk invisibility. And then there were the dangerous enhancers. Recipes for lip plumpers included mixtures of belladonna, which dilated blood vessels, or crushed hot peppers blended with oils. These made lips swell temporarily, creating a fuller look, but belladonna also blurred vision and strained the heart, while peppers caused painful sores. Women accepted these side effects, smiling through stinging pain, because the result was worth it. Rouge had its own rituals. In France, powdered rouge was applied in small circles high on the cheeks, emphasizing elegance. In England, women preferred broader strokes, blending color into the cheekbones. Both styles relied on dangerous pigments, but the application itself became a social performance. Women gathered at vanities to share recipes, laugh about failed concoctions, and complain about side effects. Imagine the camaraderie. My lips cracked from that new vermilion. Oh, mine swelled for days after the arsenic blend. They laughed, nodded, and kept applying. Perfume sellers and apothecaries thrived in this trade. They marketed rouges and lip stains as miraculous, boasting that they lasted all night, or brought youth to the cheek. They rarely mentioned the side effects. Why would they? Beauty was good business, and a dead client could always be replaced by another desperate for admiration. Even artists helped perpetuate the obsession. Painters like Bronzino or Holbein immortalized noble women with glowing red lips and flushed cheeks. These portraits reinforced the ideal, making women believe they needed the same look to match their painted selves. No painter depicted the sores hidden beneath the rouge or the tremors caused by mercury. Art celebrated the mask, never the truth. Over time, the poisons accumulated. Chroniclers noted noble women collapsing at feasts, suffering fainting fits, or dying young of mysterious illnesses. Physicians sometimes linked these deaths to cosmetics, but their warnings went largely unheeded. Picture a widow in Venice, older now, her lips still painted vermilion. She sits by a window gazing out at gondolas drifting by. Her hands shake violently, her skin is scarred, her teeth have fallen out. Neighbors whisper that she's cursed or bewitched. In truth, she is simply living proof of mercury's slow destruction. Yet each morning, she still reaches for the rouge jar, because what else can she do? Appear plain, abandoned, invisible? Never. Better to go down painted than forgotten. As you leave that Renaissance chamber, the air still sharp with vinegar and mercury, you realize how little has changed. Beauty demands color, and humans will pay any price to get it, even if that price is slow, silent death. The lip stains and rouges of history were never just decoration. They were a contract. Brilliance tonight, decline tomorrow, and time after time people signed their names in crimson. Hair, perhaps more than skin, signaled identity. To be fair-haired in many parts of Europe meant elegance, angelic purity, or high fashion. Dark hair, while common, often carried associations with peasants, foreignness, or even witchcraft. So naturally, women and men sought to lighten, curl, or sculpt their hair, no matter how caustic the recipes became. One of the most notorious techniques was bleaching. Venetian women, admired across Europe for their golden locks, became icons of the sun hat bleaching ritual. Picture this: women sitting on rooftop terraces or balconies, their heads encased in wide-brimmed hats with the crown cut out, their hair pulled through the opening cascaded into the sun while the rest of the hat shaded their pale faces. On their strands they'd applied a mixture of lye, sodium hydroxide, vinegar, and often stale urine. The sun developed the chemical reaction, lightening hair shade by shade. The result: glorious blonde hair that poets praised and painters immortalized. The cost: scorched scalps, brittle hair that snapped in handfuls, and infections where skin blistered. Urine might sound bizarre now, but it was full of ammonia, which does act as a bleaching agent. Combined with lye, it was powerful enough to strip color and layers of scalp along with it. Women endured hours of stinging pain under the sun, their servants fanning them and whispering encouragement. If the burning was unbearable, that was considered proof it was working. A neighbor might sniff the acrid scent and politely pretend not to gag. The price of glamour was public endurance of pain. For women who couldn't afford rooftop sessions, apothecaries offered bottled blonde waters. Recipes often contained sulfur, alum, and metallic salts, some spiked with arsenic or mercury. Applied to hair, they gave a temporary sheen, but over time they damaged follicles so severely that baldness followed. Enter wigs, already popular in Renaissance courts. A woman might burn off half her natural hair in pursuit of blondness, then hide the damage under wigs dusted with toxic powders. Hair wasn't only bleached, it was also dyed darker, curled, or smoothed with equally harsh recipes. One method to achieve glossy black hair involved soaking strands in a mixture of lead combs, dipped in vinegar. The acidic vinegar corroded the lead, producing lead acetate, which darkened hair like ink. Yes, you read that correctly. Women literally combed their hair with lead. Over time, the scalp absorbed enough to cause headaches, neurological symptoms, and hair loss. The irony is painful. Tools designed to beautify actually accelerated the very baldness they were meant to hide. Men weren't immune. In the 17th century, courtiers obsessed over perfectly curled locks, either natural or wigs styled with heated irons. Before modern temperature controls, irons were plunged into coals, heated to dangerous levels, then pressed against hair. Singed strands, burned scalps, and fire hazards were common. Fashion demanded ringlets, pain and risk obliged. Wigs became an empire of their own. By the late 17th and 18th centuries, men and women alike wore towering perukes powdered with starch or scented dusts. At first the powders were just flour, but soon perfumers added toxic extras, like mercury compounds to kill lice or lead powders to whiten the wig. When applied, these powders filled the air with invisible toxins. Courtiers sneezed clouds of poison, servants coughed, and guests at balls waded through toxic fog as wigs bobbed and swayed. There's even a report of entire wig rooms, where hundreds of hairpieces were hung, fumigated with mercury, to cleanse them of vermin. Workers who maintained wigs often died young, their bodies wrecked by mercury vapor, yet the wigs remained symbols of elegance, power, and rank. A high wig was a high station. No one asked what it cost the wearers or the wig makers behind the scenes. Some treatments were outright bizarre. In France, concoctions to nourish hair included raw onion juice, boiled leeches, or mixtures of bull's urine. These smelled horrific but promised miraculous growth. Spoiler, they didn't work, but the placebo effect of stinging skin and foul odors convinced many that the remedies had power. If your scalp burned and your neighbors recoiled, surely that meant beauty was taking hold. Perfumed pomades were another staple, made of animal fats, blended with perfumes. These pomades gave wigs and natural hair sheen, but fats spoiled quickly, turning rancid under candlelight and body heat. To mask the stench, more perfumes were added, many containing mercury or arsenic stabilizers. Imagine leaning close to a courtier, inhaling a heady mix of roses, musk, and slow poison. The social meaning of hair cannot be overstated. In Venice, golden locks symbolized sophistication. In France, towering powdered wigs declared political and social rank. In England, tightly curled locks framed portraits of kings and courtiers. Women in Spain, meanwhile, prized dark, sleek hair, treated with vinegar-led combs. Each culture set its ideal, and each demanded its devotees suffer for it. The worst part, children were sometimes pulled into the same rituals. Mothers bleached their daughters' hair with sun hat methods, or applied harsh dyes to make them look more appealing for marriage prospects. Young scalps burned, childhood hair fell out, but society smiled at their angelic golden tresses. Consider a ball at Versailles mid-18th century. Chandeliers blaze, mirrors reflect endless light, and music echoes through gilded halls. Men's wigs rise in powdered clouds, women's hair towers higher still, adorned with jewels, ribbons, even miniature ships or bird cages. From a distance it looks magnificent, a moving sculpture of elegance, but up close the wigs reek of rancid pomade, lice crawl beneath powdered layers, and the air is thick with toxic dust. Courtiers cough discreetly behind gloved hands, servants sweep fallen wig powder from the floor, yet everyone continues smiling, bowing and dancing because to reject wigs was to reject status. And then the aftermath, shaved scalps irritated by lye, wigs treated with mercury, powders clogging lungs. By morning courtiers scratched at sores, coughed blood, or collapsed from mysterious fevers. Physicians prescribed more tonics, sometimes laced with arsenic or mercury themselves. The cycle was relentless. It wasn't just Europe. Across Asia too, hair treatments carried risks. In China, elaborate hair dyes used lead-based pigments to darken strands. In Japan, geisha and kabuki actors styled hair with waxes and oils that trapped dirt and heat, leading to infections. Each culture bore its own version of sacrifice, but the pattern was universal. Beauty demanded suffering, and suffering was disguised as glamour. Standing in a wig maker's shop you see rows of hairpieces waiting, their curls dusted with fine powders. The air is dense, workers' hands tremble, their lungs rattle, they're dying for the fashions of kings and queens. Yet outside, a carriage waits to collect the latest powdered wig, for a duchess who will parade it at a banquet, admired by all. No one asks where the powder came from, or what it's doing to the heads it crowns. Hair, like skin, became another battlefield where vanity outpaced safety. From urine-soaked sun rituals to mercury fumigation, every strand of fashion shimmered with hidden peril. And yet, when you look at portraits from the age, the effect is undeniable. Glowing blonde curls, towering wigs, powdered elegance. They're beautiful, immortalized in art, but you know the truth, that the golden shimmer came at the price of scorched scalps, poisoned lungs, and lives cut short. As you leave the wig shop, the air clearing behind you, you realize that every lock of hair in history carried not just style but sacrifice. Beauty once again was never just surface, it was survival by way of suffering, and the strands that shimmered brightest were often the strands most steeped in poison. The powdered wigs and scorched scalps of Europe fade, and now you step into another chamber where the air is sweeter at first, but don't be fooled, it's the world of perfumes and powders, and beneath their alluring fragrance lies a cocktail of poisons. From Renaissance Venice to Enlightenment Paris, scent was not just luxury, it was armor. People lived surrounded by foul smells, unwashed bodies, overflowing privies, rotting refuse in the streets. To carry a cloud of perfume around you was to declare superiority, refinement, even morality. But the price of that scented aura was often hidden inside the vial. Perfume, like cosmetics, began innocently enough. The Egyptians had steeped flowers in oils, the Arabs perfected distillation, and medieval monasteries experimented with herbs. By the 16th and 17th centuries, perfumers in Italy and France produced concoctions that dazzled courts across Europe. Rose, jasmine, violet, ambergris, civet, and musk, all exotic, all precious. But to preserve these scents, or to intensify them, perfumers turned to stabilizers and fixatives that came from minerals, and those minerals carried heavy metal poisons. Mercury salts appeared in some recipes as fixatives. A few drops kept a perfume from turning rancid, but the vapor released was toxic. Women who dabbed scented oils on their necks and wrists were unknowingly absorbing mercury through skin and inhaling it with every breath. Arsenic sometimes appeared as a preservative, especially in powdered perfumes sprinkled into wigs or onto gowns, and lead-based compounds were used in scented face powders, ensuring that every perfumed puff carried not only roses but ruin. Powder itself was everywhere. Face powders, wig powders, body powders, all scented, all designed to mask odors and project elegance. But the base of these powders was often lead carbonate or talc contaminated with arsenic. Courtiers dabbed puffs across their cheeks before a ball, then leaned close to whisper secrets into each other's ears. With every whisper came a breath of lead dust, slipping into lungs. Imagine a Parisian salon in the 18th century. The air is thick with powdered wigs and perfumed skin. Candles flicker, fans flutter, and conversation sparkles. But beneath the fragrance of violets and musk lies an invisible haze of toxins. Guests inhale it hour after hour, their lungs filling with lead, mercury and arsenic. They leave giddy from the wit of conversation, but also from low-level poisoning. Perfumed gloves became another fashion. In the 16th and 17th centuries, leather gloves were soaked in scented oils, orange blossom, rose, lavender, or musk, to mask the smell of tanned hide, but tanning itself often used mercury salts, which lingered in the leather. Wearing perfumed gloves meant pressing mercury directly into your skin for hours each day. Queen Catherine de' Medici famously popularized these gloves in France, setting a trend that spread across Europe. Elegant, yes. Safe, not at all. Crushed pearls entered the mix, too. Pearl powder was marketed as a luxury additive in both perfumes and face powders. Rich women boasted of creams that glowed with ground pearls, but pearls are calcium carbonate, not poisonous in themselves. Some recipes for scented waters were even more bizarre. A Venetian perfumer recommended distilling flowers in a base of mercury, believing it captured the essence more strongly. Another recipe called for boiling herbs in arsenic-laced wine, straining the mixture, and bottling it as a tonic. These brews were sipped, sprinkled or sprayed, consumed directly in ways that guaranteed poisoning, yet they were praised in fashion circles as marvels of chemistry. Perfumes weren't just personal, they were architectural. Wealthy families perfumed their chambers by burning resins or scattering scented powders across floors. Balls and feasts were drenched in scent, candles infused with musk and ambergris smoked in every corner, but those resins and powders were often adulterated with metallic salts to make them burn brighter or last longer, so the very air of elegance in palaces was laced with toxins. Guests might cough delicately, wave fans and blame the smoke. None realized the improvement in fragrance was actually poisoning them. Powders for wigs were equally insidious. White wigs demanded white powder, and flour alone wasn't always sufficient. Perfumers mixed in white lead to achieve a brilliant whiteness. To mask the metallic smell, they added rose or lavender oil. Thus, a courtier's wig shimmered white, smelled floral, and poisoned both wearer and those nearby. Servants dusting wigs often suffered most. Imagine a servant clapping powder onto a duke's wig, clouds rising around him. By evening his throat burns, his head aches, his skin erupts in rashes, he collapses young, forgotten, while the duke dances on, oblivious. The cultural meaning of perfume amplified the risk. Scent wasn't just luxury, it was morality. Bad smells were associated with sin, disease, and corruption. Sweet smells signaled purity and health, so people clung to perfume as if their reputations depended on it. To smell foul was to invite suspicion. To smell sweet was to declare yourself virtuous, and if poison was the price of virtue, so be it. Think of Louis XIV's court at Versailles. Known as the perfumed court, it overflowed with scent. Courtiers drenched themselves in perfumes, powders and pomades. Letters described the air of Versailles as suffocatingly sweet, every corridor clouded with fragrance. But beneath the sweetness, courtiers sickened. Chronic headaches, fainting, skin lesions and mysterious fevers swept the palace. Physicians diagnosed vapors or weak constitutions. The real cause was the toxic fog of beauty. Even beyond Europe, perfumes carried risks. In Mughal India, attars, distilled perfumes, were blended with metallic fixatives. In the Ottoman Empire, rose water mixed with mercury salts became popular at court. In China, incense powders sometimes contained lead to stabilize burning. Everywhere, the desire for lasting fragrance brought hidden poisons. Consider a noblewoman preparing for a masquerade. She powders her wig with scented dust, sprinkles her gown with perfumed sachets, dabs her neck with musk, and slips on perfumed gloves. She glows, she smells divine, she enters the ball to murmurs of admiration. But as she dances, her head grows heavy, her skin itches, and her throat closes. By morning she faints in her chamber, chalked up to nerves. No one suspects her beauty was her assassin. And yet perfumes and powders endured, because they worked. They transformed foul-smelling bodies into fragrant idols, masked sores with white dust, and cloaked lice with floral clouds. They created the illusion of refinement so convincingly that no one dared go without them. The great irony. Today, modern perfumes still use synthetic fixatives, some of which raise health concerns. Powders, too, linger as risks. Toll contaminated with asbestos, skin lightening creams spiked with mercury. The past isn't gone, it's just rebranded. The perfumed clouds of Versailles fade, and now you're seated at a dressing table in 18th century France, the powder puff hovering dangerously close to your skin. Tonight's concern is not wigs or perfume, but the rosy glow of youth. Rouge, blush, the delicate tint that makes cheeks appear alive, flirtatious, and desirable, and like everything else in this story, that glow was purchased with hidden poison. A pale face without rouge looked ghostly, even sickly. Society demanded contrast, the snow-white base of lead powder, topped with a bloom of pink or red. Without rouge, a noblewoman looked unfinished, like a painting left uncolored. With rouge, she looked vibrant, even if she was dying beneath the mask. The most common ingredient for rouge was once again our old friend lead. Lead carbonate, already used in white ceruse, was blended with plant dyes to create a pinkish powder, but some manufacturers skipped the plant entirely and tinted lead directly, producing shimmering blushes that clung to skin and slowly poisoned it. Women brushed these powders high on the cheekbones, sometimes in bold red circles, other times blended into the temples. The effect was chic, coquettish, fashionable. The effect beneath, rashes, sores and lead slowly trickling into the bloodstream. Mercury joined the party too. Vermilion rouge, made from mercury sulfide, was popular because it produced a vibrant, long-lasting red. Courtiers dusted it onto cheeks before balls, actresses smeared it thickly for stage lights. But mercury is a trickster. It gave cheeks their glow while attacking nerves and organs. Chronic users developed tremors, mood swings, and eventually madness. Some contemporaries described rouge-wearing women as hysterical or volatile. They weren't wrong, but the cause was not character, it was chemistry. Arsenic also appeared, though less commonly, in blush powders. Mixed with chalk or starch, arsenic compounds produced a soft pink flush. Applied daily, they irritated skin, inflamed lungs and poisoned blood. Yet manuals praised these powders as delicate enhancers, as if the faint rosy haze excused the risk of convulsions. Even when safer dyes like carmine from crushed cochineal insects were used, merchants often adulterated them with metallic fillers to increase volume. So a jar that claimed to contain exotic carmine from the Americas often held a lethal blend of insect pigment and lead dust. Women paid dearly, in coin and in health, for what they thought was purity. And men weren't exempt. In 18th century France, male courtiers at Versailles also wore rouge, sometimes in heavier amounts than women. Rouge signaled vitality, health and status. A flushed face was fashionable, even masculine. But behind those powdered cheeks lurked the same dangers. Men painted themselves into illness with as much enthusiasm as their wives and sisters. The ritual of applying rouge became almost ceremonial. At boudoirs across Europe, women gathered with servants and friends, dipping brushes into rouge pots, comparing shades. One lady might boast of her vermilion imported from Spain, another of her delicate pink from Venice. They laughed, teased, and layered on color until the mirror reflected perfection. The sores beneath, hidden, the headaches, ignored, the trembling hands, explained away as nerves. Stage performers relied on rouge more heavily still. Candlelit theaters demanded bold faces, so actresses caked on mercury vermilion until their cheeks practically glowed in the dark. Audiences gasped at their beauty, never realizing they were watching women slowly poisoned by their art. Some actresses collapsed mid-career, their decline blamed on dissolute lives. In truth, it was rouge, not recklessness, that consumed them. Consider a masquerade in Paris, 1775. Chandeliers blaze, violins trill, and the hall glitters with silk and jewels. Every woman's face glows with snow-white base and crimson rouge. They laugh, whisper, dance and flirt behind masks. From a distance it is a garden of roses, but if you step close, you see the cracks, powder caked over sores, lips trembling from mercury, faint coughs hidden behind fans. The roses are painted, the garden toxic. Rouge also carried moral symbolism. Critics accused women of deception, claiming painted cheeks were dishonest, a lure to entrap men. Satirists mocked courtiers whose rouge smeared on linens or melted in heat. Caricatures showed women with exaggerated red circles, clowns of their own vanity, yet even the critics admitted the look was alluring. Hypocrisy ran deep. Men mocked painted women, even as they demanded them. The obsession with rouge grew so strong that in some places it became almost political. During the French Revolution, aristocrats were mocked as powdered dolls, their whitened faces and rosy cheeks symbols of decadence. Revolutionary women sometimes rejected rouge as a statement of simplicity and equality, but even then, rouge didn't vanish, it simply changed hands, reappearing later in different forms. Rouge also bled into medicine. Some recipes advertised themselves as tonics to restore color to pale faces. In truth, they were just blush powders repackaged. women who believed they were treating illness were in fact compounding it, layering poison on poison. The legacy of rouge lingers disturbingly long. In the 19th century, arsenic wafers were sold to improve complexion, giving a faint rosy glow from within. Women swallowed small doses, convinced they were achieving natural blush. The wafers were literally candy-coated poison, sold openly, until authorities finally banned them, but by then countless women had wasted away in the name of a healthy flush. Imagine one final scene: a duchess in 1780, older now, sitting before her mirror. Her hands tremble as she dips her brush into vermilion rouge. Her skin is scarred, her lips pale, her body frail, but as the brush sweeps across her cheeks, she smiles. In the mirror, she sees not age or illness, but youth, beauty, and power. She knows the rouge burns, that her cough worsens each day. Still, she applies it, because without it, she would be invisible, and invisibility, in her world, is worse than death. You step away from the dressing table, the scent of rose and mercury clinging to your clothes. You realize that every rosy cheek in history came at a cost, sometimes subtle, sometimes catastrophic. Beauty was never just surface, it was survival, and rouge, more than any powder, embodied the paradox, a glow of life built from the dust of death. The rosy cheeks of the 18th century fade, and now you enter a chamber filled with the scent of pomades, starch, and hair powder. A row of wigs hangs on wooden stands, their curls dusted white, their size so extravagant they threaten to brush the ceiling beams. But this time, the focus isn't only on wigs as fashion, it's on the medicines and cures that went hand in hand with wigs, especially mercury, that silvery trickster that promised to heal while ensuring slow ruin. By the 17th century, wigs weren't just style, they were necessity. Across Europe, syphilis ravaged populations, causing sores, fevers, and most visibly, hair loss. Men and women who once flaunted natural locks now faced patchy baldness. To cover it, they turned to perukes, wigs made of human or animal hair, powdered and styled into elaborate forms. A bald head shouted illness, a wig declared vitality, but underneath every wig lurked another story, one soaked in mercury. Mercury had long been a medicine for syphilis. Physicians prescribed mercury ointments to rub into the skin, mercury vapors to inhale, and mercury pills to swallow. The belief was simple: mercury made patients sweat and salivate, and purging the body was thought to expel the disease. A night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury, the saying went, meaning one night of passion led to syphilis, and a lifetime of mercury treatment followed. Imagine a nobleman, in 1700, stripped to his linens, sitting in a steaming tent. A physician burns cinnabar, filling the tent with mercury vapor. The patient sweats profusely, drool dripping down his chin, as attendants cheer that the cure is working. In reality, the mercury is corroding his mouth, loosening his teeth, damaging his organs. After weeks, his syphilitic sores might recede slightly, but only because the poison has overwhelmed his immune system. And when the sores return, as they always did, the physician prescribes more mercury. Meanwhile, the patient's hair falls out, sometimes from syphilis, sometimes from mercury itself. Baldness becomes a social scarlet letter, so he dons a wig, powdered bright white with lead and starch. His head sweats under the wig, scalp itching, sores festering in the dark. But in public he appears elegant, his illness hidden beneath curls. No one whispers of syphilis, they admire his wig. Vanity and poison collude perfectly, each hiding the other. Women faced the same battle. Baldness from disease or mercury was masked by towering wigs, decorated with feathers, jewels, even miniature ships in France's more extravagant courts. The taller the wig, the higher the status, yet the wigs demanded endless upkeep, cleaning, powdering, fumigating. Consider Versailles at the height of wig fashion. Hundreds of courtiers crowd the hall of mirrors, wigs towering, powder clouds rising. Servants scurry with puffs, topping up whiteness. Musicians cough behind their instruments, their lungs choked with powder and mercury residue, yet the court glitters, radiant under chandeliers, each powdered head a symbol of power. The irony is staggering. The very wigs meant to project health and elegance are breeding grounds of poison and disease. Cosmetic powders added another layer of danger. To keep wigs smelling sweet, perfumers mixed powders with lavender, rose or orange blossom, but these scents were stabilized with metallic salts. Lead carbonate gave powders brightness, mercury salts prevented mold, arsenic disguised rancid fats in pomades. So every puff of scented powder released a toxic mist. Courtiers inhaled it daily, servants choked on it hourly, wig makers died from it entirely. And what about the face beneath the wig? Here too mercury intruded. Physicians prescribed grey ointment, a mercury-based salve, for skin blemishes. Women dabbed it onto spots, warts or freckles, believing it smoothed complexions. In the short term, blemishes might fade. In the long term, mercury corroded skin, scarred tissue and sickened the body. Still, recipes circulated in beauty manuals, praised as miracle cures. Even children were not spared. Boys sent to wigmakers as apprentices spent long hours combing, powdering and fumigating hairpieces. Mercury exposure made them tremble by adolescence. Many died before reaching 30, yet their work adorned dukes and duchesses who never thought of the hands that shaped their wigs. The sacrifice was invisible, hidden beneath curls of fashion. By the late 18th century, caricaturists mocked the absurdity. Prints showed women with wigs so tall they toppled into chandeliers, or men with curls powdered into oblivion. Satirists joked about wigs infested with mice or collapsing under powder, but behind the humor lay truth. Wigs were unhealthy, unsanitary, and steeped in toxins, and yet society clung to them. The obsession reached absurd heights in France. Marie Antoinette and her court popularized hairstyles so elaborate they required scaffolding. One design, the pouf à la belle poule, featured a miniature warship perched atop a wig, celebrating a French naval victory. Constructing such a wig took hours, required gallons of powder, and often left wearers with neck pain and sores. Servants lit candles carefully, for fear wigs would ignite, and when lice inevitably infested the structures, wigs were fumigated again with mercury. Meanwhile, in England, powdered wigs became synonymous with professions. Judges, barristers, and officials wore them as uniforms. Even as fashion shifted, the legal system clung to wigs, associating them with dignity. The irony: dignity was literally powdered with poison. Courtrooms filled with lead and mercury dust, while defendants coughed at the bar. Tradition, it seemed, was worth any health risk. By the 19th century, wigs faded from daily wear, but left a toxic legacy. Mercury continued as a cure for syphilis, until well into the 20th century, ruining lives long after its dangers were known. Lead powders lingered in beauty routines, and the association between hair health and social standing persisted. New poisons simply replaced the old. And as you step back into the glittering court, you realize that wigs were never just fashion. They were masks of disease, monuments of vanity, and silent killers. Beneath every powdered curl was a story of mercury, madness, and misery, and yet in portraits, they still look magnificent. That's the cruel genius of beauty. It preserves the illusion, even as it buries the truth. The powdered wigs drift into silence, and you find yourself in the drawing rooms of the 19th century. The corseted figures move stiffly, their gowns glitter with lace and silk, and the faintest scent of lavender clings to the air. But tonight's focus is not on hair or wigs, it's on the body itself, on corsets, stays, and the culture of fainting that swept through Europe and America. For centuries, beauty had been painted onto the skin, brushed through hair, or perfumed into the air. Now it was stitched into fabric and cinched around the ribs, reshaping bodies into symbols of fashion while crushing the organs within. The corset was not new in the 19th century. It had roots in Renaissance stays and 18th century bodices, but by the Victorian age, it became an obsession. Industrial advances allowed mass production of corsets, with whalebone, steel, and complex lacing systems, and society demanded that every respectable woman, from duchess to shopgirl, wear one. A corset wasn't just fashion, it was morality. A tightly laced waist symbolized discipline, refinement, and virtue. To appear uncorseted was to appear indecent, even immoral. Imagine standing in a Victorian bedroom, watching a maid tug at the laces of her mistress's corset. The lady clings to the bedpost, gasping as her waist shrinks inch by inch. 10 inches of compression are not uncommon. Breasts are hoisted, hips exaggerated, waist squeezed into impossibly small proportions. At last, the maid ties the laces, and the lady exhales if she can. She smooths her skirts, adjusts her gloves, and smiles in the mirror. To her, this is beauty. To her lungs, it is suffocation. Doctors of the time debated the corset fiercely. Some praised it as support for the spine, claiming it improved posture. Others warned that tight lacing deformed ribs, displaced organs, and caused fainting. Autopsies revealed livers with permanent grooves, lungs compressed, and stomachs displaced downward. Women complained of indigestion, constipation, and headaches. But instead of blaming corsets, many blamed their own weak constitutions. Fainting, after all, had become fashionable. Yes, fainting was not just tolerated, it was a cultural performance. Fainting couches adorned parlors, and women swooning at balls were assisted by gallant men. Literature and art romanticized the image of the delicate woman overcome by emotion or heat, but the truth was often more mechanical. Lack of oxygen from a tightly laced corset. Imagine a woman twirling at a ball, her ribs straining against steel, her lungs struggling for air. She collapses gracefully into a gentleman's arms. Everyone whispers about her fragile beauty. No one admits her collapse was caused by slow strangulation of her own torso. The health risks didn't end with fainting. Pregnancy in corsets was especially dangerous. Maternity corsets were sold, claiming to support expectant mothers, but they constricted growth, displaced fetuses, and contributed to miscarriages. Women wore them anyway, because appearing shapely and disciplined mattered more than medical warnings. Fashion trumped life. And the corset was not just about health, it was about social control. A tightly laced waist was a symbol of morality and obedience. Mothers laced daughters early, training them to endure pain silently. A girl's worth was measured by her waistline, often documented in inches. Young women competed to achieve wasp waists, boasting of corsets laced to 13 or 14 inches. It was a beauty contest of bone-crushing endurance. Men, too, were drawn into the corset's orbit. Dandies in the 19th century sometimes wore corsets or waistcoats designed to slim their figures. Soldiers wore supportive corsets for posture, though less extreme than women's. Even boys were occasionally laced into corsets to train their spines. Fashion crossed gender, though women bore the heaviest burden. Doctors coined the term tight lacing syndrome to describe chronic issues, difficulty breathing, palpitations, uterine prolapse, and digestive problems. Satirical magazines mocked women who fainted constantly or waddled stiffly in too tight corsets. But satire did little to stop the trend. Even when critics warned of corset liver or deformed chests, fashionable women replied that no illness was worse than appearing unfashionable. Consider the daily routine. A woman rises, her maid helps her bathe, and the corset ritual begins. Laces tighten, the body transforms, and by breakfast she can hardly eat. Meals are smaller, digestion slower, appetite diminished. Doctors later noted that corsets caused some women to lose weight, simply because they could not stomach food. In this way, corsets doubled as an early and dangerous form of body control. The irony is sharp. While corsets crushed bodies, they were praised as supports for morality. Manuals told women that a well-laced corset prevented slouching, laziness, even sinful indulgence. A cinched waist was not just beautiful, it was virtuous. To loosen your laces was to risk appearing slovenly, or worse, promiscuous. Beauty and morality fused, and poison disguised itself as virtue. The stories are chilling. Some women laced so tightly their ribs broke, others developed chronic coughs and weakened lungs, vulnerable to tuberculosis. Fainting at balls became so common that smelling salts were a fashionable accessory. Husbands sometimes demanded wives lace tighter, believing a wasp waist signaled elegance. Mothers boasted of daughters' tiny measurements, ignoring their daughters' shallow breathing. Yet women also embraced corsets as power. A tiny waist drew admiration, secured marriage prospects, and commanded attention. In a society where women's value was judged by appearance, the corset was armor. Pain became a badge of beauty, and beauty was survival. Consider one evening in a Victorian opera house. Chandeliers blaze, gowns shimmer, and the air is thick with perfume. Women sit rigidly, their corsets forcing perfect posture. Their soprano belts high notes on stage, while in the audience, ladies struggle to inhale without gasping. A faint thud interrupts the music. A woman has collapsed in her seat. Ushers rush to assist, carrying her to the foyer. Everyone nods sympathetically, murmuring about her delicate constitution. They do not say aloud what everyone knows: her corset was laced too tightly. The fashion endured for decades, though voices of resistance grew. Dress reform movements in the mid-19th century called for looser clothing, healthier garments, and natural waistlines. Amelia Bloomer promoted trousers for women, mocked at the time, celebrated later. Doctors joined reformers, urging moderation, but corsets did not vanish. Instead, they adapted, marketed as health corsets, with flexible stays. The promise of beauty without pain was tempting, but the reality rarely matched. By the late 19th century, the hourglass figure dominated, pushed further by advertisements and illustrations. The Gibson girl epitomized the ideal: broad shoulders, tiny waist, wide hips. Women starved, laced, and fainted their way into the silhouette, and behind the glamour lay the same dangers: ribs deformed, organs shifted, lungs compressed. Imagine one last scene: a young bride in 1890, laced tightly into her wedding gown. Her waist measures 15 inches, her ribs pressed into her liver. She smiles through the ceremony, blushes beneath her veil, but by the feast she cannot eat, cannot breathe, cannot stand. Guests whisper about her fragility, her beauty, her virtue. They do not see the agony beneath her gown, the bruises pressed into her skin, the faint scars on her ribs. She is admired, envied, praised, and she is slowly dying for fashion. The corset, like every beauty secret before it, promised transformation. It delivered suffering. It gave women power in society even as it stole power from their bodies, and it left a legacy that lingers still, in diets, waist trainers, and ideals of thinness. The fainting couches may be gone, but the lesson remains. Beauty, once again, was achieved by crushing the body into submission. The echo of corset laces being tugged tight fades, and now you step into a parlor bathed in gaslight. It is the Victorian age, the 19th century in full bloom, and on every polished dressing table sits a dazzling array of bottles, jars, powders, and tinctures, but behind their elegant labels lies a chemistry set that would make a modern toxicologist blanch. Tonight, you're peering into the world of Victorian complexion products, lotions, drops, and tonics that promised eternal youth, but delivered pain, illness, and sometimes death. The Victorian ideal of beauty was paradoxical. Women were expected to look both delicate and vibrant, skin pale as porcelain yet glowing with health, eyes large and shining, cheeks faintly rosy but never ruddy. Achieving this impossible balance required an arsenal of aids, and the aids were laced with poisons. Ammonia washes were another staple, advertised as deep cleaners for the skin. They were essentially diluted household ammonia, strong enough to strip grease and layers of flesh. Women soaked cloths in ammonia, then pressed them against their cheeks until the skin stung and turned red. The immediate effect was a fresh, youthful flush. The long-term effect was burns, scarring, and chronic irritation. Some manuals even suggested mixing ammonia with lemon juice for a brightening tonic. The result was chemical warfare against the face, but the sting was seen as proof that it worked, the Victorian version of feel the burn. And then there were the deadly tonics. Arsenic, long known as a poison, found a second life as a beauty treatment. Chemists sold arsenic wafers, thin sheets laced with microdoses of arsenic, promising to clear complexions and impart a faint fashionable pallor. Women swallowed them daily, believing they were eating their way to beauty. In truth, they were dosing themselves with poison that caused nausea, hair loss, skin eruptions, and slow organ failure. Yet advertisements called them perfectly safe if taken as directed. Imagine sitting at a vanity, nibbling a wafer between sips of tea, unaware that each bite shortened your life. Some women even drank Fowler's solution, a popular 19th century tonic of potassium arsenite, diluted in water, marketed for everything from psoriasis to freckles. It was essentially arsenic in a bottle. Physicians prescribed it liberally. Patients reported clear skin at first, then anemia, neuropathy, and death. But glowing reviews in newspapers kept the solution selling. Beauty, after all, mattered more than a few headaches. Lead never disappeared either. Complexion creams often contained lead acetate or carbonate, sometimes disguised as lotion of youth. Women smoothed it across their faces at night, waking with skin that appeared softer and lighter. Mercury joined the roster in freckle removers. Corrosive sublimate, a form of mercury chloride, was mixed into lotions designed to erase freckles and age spots. Applied carefully, it did strip pigment by literally burning the skin. Women endured stinging, peeling, and scarring, reassured that the pain was a sign of progress. But mercury absorbed through the skin, entered the bloodstream, leading to tremors, kidney damage, and madness. A woman might beam at her spot-free cheeks, while her body quietly collapsed. Even soaps carried risks. Carbolic acid soaps, marketed as disinfectants, caused burns and irritation. Some soaps were laced with arsenic to purify the skin. Others contained borax or strong alkalis that stripped oils and left skin raw. But Victorians trusted labels that promised scientific innovation. Science was the new religion, and if science said arsenic cured freckles, then arsenic it was. The marketing was relentless. Ads in newspapers and ladies' magazines touted the secret of youthful beauty, a safe complexion cure, the modern miracle for spots. Testimonials claimed women regained the glow of their 20s, that suitors returned, that marriages were saved. The language was seductive, the side effects buried. It was the 19th century version of influencer marketing, with deadly products hiding behind glossy promises. Consider a middle-class household in 1860. The mother applies arsenic wafers each morning, the daughter drops belladonna in her eyes before a ball, the son dabs his cheeks with lead lotion to look vigorous at work. They sit together at breakfast, sipping tea laced with sugar from lead-lined containers. Their conversation is cheerful, their appearance is impeccable, but their bodies are quietly decaying, poisoned by their own routines. Doctors began to notice patterns. Patients with chronic weakness, tremors, or lesions often confessed to using complexion products. Reports appeared in medical journals linking arsenic, mercury, and lead to cosmetic routines. Reformers urged regulation, but the beauty industry resisted fiercely. Profits were too high, demand too strong. By the time governments began regulating cosmetics in the early 20th century, generations had already suffered. And yet, despite the dangers, women defended their products passionately. In letters and diaries, some admitted they felt unwell, but refused to stop. "What is sickness compared to beauty?" wrote one young woman in 1874. "If my cheeks are pale, my suitors will not call." For her, arsenic wafers were not indulgence, but survival. The poison was a bargain she accepted. The culture of fainting couches, smelling salts, and delicate constitutions reinforced this madness. Society praised fragility in women, equating sickness with refinement. Pale skin and languid movements were desirable, so when poisons made women weak, they were rewarded with admiration. Illness itself became fashionable, further driving demand for the very products causing it. Imagine one last scene in a Victorian drawing room. A young woman reclines on a fainting couch, her corset laced, her cheeks dusted with rouge, her pupils wide from belladonna. She sips a glass of water laced with Fowler's solution, smiling faintly at her reflection in a mirror. She looks luminous, delicate, angelic. Guests admire her refinement. They do not see the ulcers in her stomach, the mercury seeping into her kidneys, the arsenic nibbling at her nerves. She is beautiful for now, and that is all society demands. Victorian beauty culture did not simply tolerate poison, it celebrated it, packaged it, and sold it as progress, and the legacy lingers still, in skin-lightening creams spiked with mercury, in unregulated tonics, in dangerous treatments marketed as miracles. The names have changed, the pattern has not. The gaslit parlors of Victorian London dim, and the stage brightens with something new, bright, glowing, modern, almost magical. It is the early 20th century, the dawn of the machine age, when science was worshipped almost as much as fashion. And here, in this strange marriage of progress and vanity, a new kind of beauty product burst onto the market, one that literally glowed. Radium creams, radium waters, radium powders. Radium, discovered by Marie and Pierre Curie in 1898, fascinated the world. Its eerie luminescence seemed like bottled starlight. Newspapers hailed it as a wonder substance, a gift from nature that could cure disease, energize the body, and restore youth. If arsenic wafers had been the Victorian miracle, radium was the modern revolution, and so, naturally, the beauty industry seized it. Imagine walking into a department store in New York in 1915. On the counter, among perfumes and powders, sits a shimmering jar, labeled Tho Radia Cream. Its slogan reads, "Science gives beauty." Inside is a blend of radium and thorium salts, suspended in a soothing base. Advertisements promise it will rejuvenate skin, erase wrinkles, and give a healthy glow. Customers believe it, because it literally glows. Under dim light, the cream emits a faint radiance, as though the face itself might shine in the dark. Women applied radium creams nightly, smoothing them into cheeks and foreheads. Men too bought radium shaving balms, radium tonics, even radium toothpaste. The message was clear: radium didn't just hide flaws, it cured them. Doctors endorsed it, celebrities praised it, and consumers rushed to embrace it. Few paused to ask, at what cost? The cost, of course, was catastrophic. Radium is radioactive. It emits alpha, beta, and gamma radiation, which seep into tissues, damage DNA, and wreak havoc on the body. At first, the effects were subtle: flushed cheeks, tingling skin, a sense of energy. People mistook these early symptoms of radiation exposure for proof the products worked, but over time, the damage accumulated: ulcers, necrosis, cancer. Yet even as the radium girls suffered, radium cosmetics flourished. Though radia creams sold in Europe into the 1930s, radium powders, lipsticks and rouges promised radiance. Radium waters, bottled drinks, spiked with radioactive salts, were marketed as health tonics. A wealthy American socialite, Eben Byers, famously drank 3 bottles of radium water a day. He glowed with energy, until his jaw rotted away, and his body collapsed. His death was so gruesome, that it finally forced regulators to crack down. But until then, radium was beauty's brightest secret. Picture a Parisian woman in 1925, applying her nightly faux radia mask. She leans close to the mirror, watching her cheeks glow faintly in the dim light. She believes she looks younger, fresher, modern. She hums a jazz tune, proud of her cutting-edge routine. What she cannot see are the invisible rays burrowing into her cells, rearranging her body one atom at a time. Her mirror shows glamour, her bones tell another story. Radium wasn't confined to creams. Perfumes infused with radium promised lasting scent. Radium powders, dusted onto cheeks, created a subtle luminescence under gaslight. Even underwear was marketed as energized with radium, supposedly invigorating the body as it was worn. Men too joined the craze. Radium shaving cream soothed skin. Radium tonics promised vigor. Radium condoms even claimed to enhance performance. The glow of progress seduced everyone. Science gave these products legitimacy. Advertisements quoted doctors, displayed laboratory diagrams, and invoked the authority of the Curie name. Even though Marie Curie herself never endorsed commercial use, consumers trusted science blindly. After centuries of powders and poisons disguised as folk remedies, radium felt modern, rational, scientific. That trust was its deadliest ingredient. The side effects became harder to ignore. Users developed sores, fatigue, strange pains. Some women lost teeth, others developed cancers of the jaw or skin, but many believed these were temporary cleansing effects. Much like Victorians believed burning skin meant a lotion was working, the suffering was reframed as proof of progress. By the time illness grew undeniable, it was too late. The tragedy of radium cosmetics is not just in their danger, but in their optimism. People genuinely believed they had found the secret of eternal youth. They thought they were embracing the future, harnessing the power of atoms for beauty. Unlike the secrecy of arsenic or mercury, radium was celebrated openly, proudly. It wasn't hidden poison, it was radiant progress, and that made it even more insidious. Consider a cocktail party in 1930s Paris. Women sparkle with radium rouge, their cheeks faintly glowing. Men sip radium water, boasting of its energy. Laughter rings out, jazz plays, and the night feels electric. Yet every laugh carries traces of radiation. Every smile hides crumbling teeth. Every sip plants tumors. The room glows with beauty, but it is a funeral pyre in disguise. Eventually, the truth could not be ignored. The radium girls sued their employers, their shattered bodies testifying to the danger. Eben Byers' gruesome death made headlines. Regulators banned radium cosmetics and tonics by the late 1930s, but by then the damage was done. Generations had suffered, glowing with poison, until the glow consumed them. The legacy lingers. Today, radium is gone from beauty products, but the dream of scientific miracle creams persists. Stem cell serums, DNA repair lotions, high-tech anti-aging devices, they promise the same miracle radium once did, and who can say, perhaps in a century, future historians will look back at our modern beauty rituals with the same horror. For now you leave the glowing jars behind, their faint light fading into darkness. You carry with you the image of women smoothing radium onto their faces, believing they had found immortality. Their mirrors showed radiance, their bodies paid the price. The dim glow of radium jars flickers out, and you step into another room bathed in electric light. The year is 1935, maybe 1940, and Hollywood is at its height. The silver screen has created a new kind of beauty, not just local courtly fashion, not just aristocratic ritual, but global glamour, projected larger than life onto cinema screens. Women in Kansas, men in Manchester, teenagers in Berlin, all gazed at movie stars and wanted to look exactly like them. And what did those stars wear? An arsenal of chemical-laden powders, paints and treatments designed for the camera, but disastrous for the skin and body beneath. The star product was Max Factor's pancake makeup, Developed for Technicolor film, it created a flawless matte finish that looked heavenly on screen. It was thick, durable, and covered every blemish, but it was also suffocating. Actors wore it for 12-hour shoots under blazing lights, their pores clogged, their skin inflamed. Directors loved it, dermatologists despised it. Stars often developed rashes, cystic acne, and premature aging, but could they stop? Not a chance. On camera, under studio contracts, they had to be perfect. Hair too became a battlefield. Platinum blondes were all the rage, thanks to stars like Jean Harlow. Achieving that icy blonde required constant bleaching with peroxide and ammonia, often leaving scalps raw and hair brittle. Some actresses reportedly lost entire patches of hair, forcing them to wear wigs or hairpieces even at the height of their careers. The glamorous platinum look glittered on screen, but the price was hidden in scalp burns and ruined follicles. Chemical perms were another craze. Machineless perms in the 1930s and 40s promised soft, wavy curls without heavy equipment. The secret was thioglycolic acid, a chemical strong enough to break hair bonds. Left on too long, it dissolved hair completely, leaving bald patches. Yet women lined up at salons, desperate to look like their favorite stars. The smell of burnt hair filled the air, endured for the sake of beauty. Lipsticks in Hollywood's golden age came in brilliant shades of red, from cherry to crimson. The pigments often contained cadmium or coal tar derivatives, some of which were carcinogenic. The lipstick industry boasted about Hollywood reds that matched studio lighting perfectly. Advertisements showed glamorous actresses puckering their lips, encouraging women everywhere to mimic them. Millions obeyed, unaware they were pressing cancer-causing chemicals against their mouths. Mascara carried its own dangers. Lash Lure, introduced in 1933, promised to darken lashes with long-lasting brilliance. Its secret ingredient was p-phenylenediamine, a coal tar dye. The results were stunning and blinding. Women reported severe allergic reactions, ulcers on eyelids, and even permanent blindness. One woman died after Lash Lure entered her bloodstream through ulcerated skin. The scandal led to stricter U.S. cosmetic regulation in 1938, but not before countless women had suffered. Behind the camera, stars faced additional torture. Lighting in the early days of film was brutal. Arc lamps emitted intense heat and UV radiation. Actors sat for hours under scorching lights, their skin blistering and aging prematurely. Some studios experimented with protective creams that contained zinc, mercury, or lead. The creams did little to protect and much to harm. The same industry that created stars consumed them with its demands. Consider the daily routine of a starlet under contract. She wakes at dawn, sits in the makeup chair for 2 hours while layers of pancake are sponged onto her face. Her hair is bleached, curled, lacquered with shellac sprays that choke the lungs. On set, she sweats under lights, her makeup cracking, her scalp itching. Between takes, she reapplies lipstick and rouge, powders her nose, sprays more perfume. By evening, her skin burns, her lungs ache, her hair is fried. She scrubs at her face with harsh cleansers, removing layers of paint, but also stripping skin raw. Tomorrow, she will do it again. And men were not spared. Leading men were powdered, their hair greased with pomades containing petroleum and coal tar. Some dyes used to cover gray were so caustic they blistered scalps. Actors complained privately, but contracts demanded perfection. A wrinkle, a blemish, a stray gray hair, any flaw risked a career. Better to endure pain silently than lose the studio's favor. Off-screen, beauty culture followed Hollywood's lead. Department stores sold star-endorsed products. Greta Garbo's lipstick, Marlene Dietrich's eyebrow pencil, Clark Gable's pomade. Women everywhere plucked their eyebrows into thin arches, inspired by actresses, and men slicked their hair with oils that irritated scalps. Hollywood glamorized poisons, and consumers copied eagerly. The irony was cruel. Stars suffered privately, yet their images radiated health and vitality. Magazines praised their flawless complexions and lustrous hair. Fans clipped photos, pasted them in scrapbooks, and dreamed of emulating them. Few knew the stars were battling breakouts, bald patches, or eye infections behind the scenes. The mask of glamour was more impenetrable than any Venetian saru. By the 1950s, technology improved somewhat. Pancake makeup gave way to lighter formulas, though still loaded with chemicals. Hair dyes became more advanced, but coal tar derivatives remained. Aerosol hairsprays entered the market, filling salons and bedrooms with clouds of polyvinyl resins and formaldehyde. Women teased their hair into bouffants, spraying layers of glue-like lacquer then inhaling toxins daily. Smoky nightclubs doubled the assault, filling lungs with both nicotine and hairspray. Even Hollywood skincare routines veered into the dangerous. Some stars swore by oxygen facials using hydrogen peroxide, which bleached and irritated skin. Others used acid peels with untested formulas. Marilyn Monroe reportedly used hormone creams containing animal extracts, which disrupted natural skin balance. The quest for eternal youth and flawless skin fueled experimentation, with actresses as guinea pigs. And yet, the glamour worked. Hollywood sold not just movies but ideals. Women in small towns saved pennies for star lipstick. Men styled their hair after Clark Gable or Cary Grant. The poisons trickled from film sets into households, normalized by fame. Imagine a film premiere in 1940. Spotlights sweep the crowd, cameras flash and stars glide down the red carpet. Their faces glow with pancake, their lips shine scarlet, their hair gleams with peroxide and shellac. Fans scream, journalists scribble, photographers capture every angle. To the public, it is perfection incarnate. To the stars, it is an exhausting mask, one they cannot remove without losing everything. The cost of glamour is measured not only in contracts and studio control, but in chemicals seeping silently into their bloodstreams. The legacy lingers. Modern Hollywood has better regulation, gentler products, safer lights. But the pattern persists. Stars still endure punishing beauty regimes, from chemical peels to injections, and consumers still copy them, eager to glow like idols. The poisons have changed, but the cycle remains. As you leave the movie set, the arc lamps dim behind you, the stars wave, smile, and vanish into cars. You know the truth. Hollywood glamour, like Venetian ceruse or radium creams, was built on sacrifice. The screen preserved the illusion forever, but the bodies beneath paid the price. The arc lamps of Hollywood dim, and now you step into the fluorescent aisles of the modern world. The shelves stretch endlessly, stacked with nail polish in shimmering rows, creams promising miracles, and powders in sleek plastic cases. The labels are glossy, the fonts scientific, the promises irresistible, but behind the advertising language, revitalizing, renewing, anti-aging, brightening, lurks a truth uncomfortably familiar. The poisons never disappeared, they simply changed costumes. Take nail polish. Bright, lacquered nails became a staple of beauty culture in the 20th century, spreading from flappers in the 1920s to suburban housewives in the 1950s, and to everyone today. But for decades, nail polishes were brewed with the toxic trio toluene, dibutyl phthalate, and formaldehyde. Toluene smoothed application but attacked the nervous system. Dibutyl phthalate kept polish flexible but disrupted hormones. Formaldehyde hardened nails but caused respiratory problems and in high exposure cancer. Salon workers inhaled fumes daily, suffering headaches, nausea, and reproductive problems. Customers thought they were just painting nails. In truth, they were painting with solvents more at home in an auto shop. Skin lightening creams became another global danger. In Europe and the Americas, the ideal shifted toward bronzed skin after Coco Chanel popularized tanning in the 1920s. But across Asia, Africa, and parts of Latin America, pale skin remained the prized symbol of status. Lipsticks, too, never fully shed their ghosts. Studies in the early 2000s found traces of lead in numerous brands. Companies denied harm, pointing to low levels, but critics noted that lipstick is applied daily, often multiple times, directly to the mouth. Over decades, even trace lead accumulates. The same metal that once created Elizabeth Ast's mask of pallor still lingers on 21st century lips. Even sunscreen, ironically marketed as health, once contained hidden risks. Early chemical sunscreens used para-aminobenzoic acid, PABA, which caused allergic reactions and potential DNA damage. Modern formulations are safer, but some filters like oxybenzone remain controversial for hormone disruption. The bitter irony, in trying to protect skin from cancer, some products may raise other risks. The marketing of natural products adds another twist. Many so-called herbal creams are adulterated with the same old culprits: lead, mercury, steroids, disguised under vague labels. Tests on imported Ayurvedic or traditional cosmetics regularly reveal toxins hidden beneath promises of ancient wisdom. Shoppers reaching for safety often grasp poison instead. Salon workers suffer worst. Nail technicians, hairdressers, and aestheticians breathe chemical soups daily. Their risks: miscarriages, cancers, chronic respiratory illness, are quietly endured, hidden behind clients' polished nails and smooth hair. The glamour enjoyed by one person is often built on the suffering of another, a pattern as old as wigmakers poisoned by mercury in Versailles. And then there are the miracle, anti-aging creams. The language could have been written in the Renaissance: erase wrinkles, restore youth, defy time. Only now the ingredients are peptides, retinoids, alpha-hydroxy acids. Many are safe, some effective, but others burn, irritate, or thin skin, and counterfeit versions, sold online, are often spiked with steroids or hydroquinone. Consumers chasing eternal youth are still swallowing the same old bargain: beauty today, consequences tomorrow. Perfumes carry risks too. Modern fragrances contain phthalates and synthetic musks linked to hormone disruption. The industry hides ingredients under the umbrella term fragrance, protecting trade secrets while obscuring health risks. A spritz on the neck may seem harmless, but daily exposure accumulates. The cloud of perfume at a party echoes the powdered haze of Versailles, sweet and seductive but never innocent. The irony is sharpest in products marketed as scientific marvels. In the mid-20th century, radioactive isotopes briefly reappeared in slimming devices and rejuvenating creams, despite radium's notorious history. Today, stem cell serums and DNA creams promise miracles with jargon-heavy advertising. The science is real, but the promises are exaggerated, and the risks unknown. A century from now, will people shake their heads at our faith in miracle molecules, just as we recoil at radium? The global scale is staggering. In Japan, skin whitening creams remain billion-dollar industries. In Brazil, hair straightening with formaldehyde-laced keratin treatments is common. In the United States, nail salons staffed by immigrant women run on chemical fume. In Africa, bleaching creams circulate, despite bans, fueled by colonial legacies of beauty tied to whiteness. Each region has its poison, shaped by culture but united by the same story: beauty demands sacrifice, and sacrifice is sold in bottles. Consider a modern bathroom shelf. A teenager applies foundation with trace metals, mascara with formaldehyde-releasing preservatives, lipstick with cadmium pigments. Her mother smooths anti-aging cream spiked with steroids, spritzes phthalate-heavy perfume, paints nails with solvent-laced lacquer. Her grandmother once used powders laced with lead, but the story hasn't changed. The names of chemicals evolve, the packaging modernizes, but the pattern remains eternal. Marketing drives it all. Advertisements feature flawless models, their images airbrushed into inhuman perfection. Social media amplifies the illusion, filters creating impossible ideals. Consumers chase these images with products promising the same results. They ignore the fine print, the hidden dangers, because the glow in the mirror feels immediate. Long-term risk is abstract, beauty is urgent. The echoes of history are deafening. Egyptian kohl, Roman ceruse, Renaissance vermilion, Victorian arsenic wafers, all promised transformation, all delivered pain. Modern products are safer, regulated, tested, but loopholes remain, enforcement lags, and counterfeit markets thrive. Even in the 21st century, beauty is often purchased with health. Imagine one last scene: a nail salon in New York. Customers chatter as technicians buff, polish, and paint. The air smells of acetone and formaldehyde. A woman leaves with perfect red nails, smiling, admired by friends. Behind her, the technician coughs, her hands raw from solvents, her lungs scarred by years of exposure. The customer glows, the worker suffers, the pattern is unchanged. Modern beauty culture is not innocent. It is the same mask, painted with new colors, sold with new science, but rooted in the same truth. Humans will risk anything for beauty, and beauty in turn will always hide its poison in the finest jar on the shelf. The fluorescent aisles of today's beauty industry flicker behind you, and slowly you enter a softer place. This is the end of the story. The long arc of powders and paints, rouges and creams, oils and perfumes, wigs and corsets, all stretching from the banks of the Nile to the mirrored walls of modern salons. You've walked through thousands of years of human history, and everywhere the same truth whispers: beauty is never free. It always comes at a cost, sometimes tiny, sometimes catastrophic, often hidden. Think back. You began in ancient Egypt, where noble women painted their eyes with black coal and green malachite, believing they invoked the gods. The jars looked divine, but their powders smuggled lead and copper into bloodstreams. The beauty of Nefertiti's gaze was sharpened by poison. Then Rome, where cerussa, a paste of lead and vinegar, turned faces ghostly pale, hiding blemishes while rotting skin beneath. A senator's wife reclined in marble halls with cheeks smooth as marble, even as her body quietly betrayed her. The Middle Ages brought arsenic powders, powders whispered from apothecaries' shops, brushed onto cheeks in candlelight. The look was angelic pallor, but the body was racked by sores, tremors, weakness. Renaissance courts doubled down, coating faces in Venetian ceruse, painting lips with mercury vermilion, bleaching hair with caustic sun hat rituals. Queen Elizabeth's porcelain mask, immortalized in portraits, hid pox scars and rot beneath its painted perfection. The 17th and 18th centuries powdered everything: wigs, faces, gowns, even gloves. Perfumed dust clouds filled salons, each puff laced with lead, mercury, or arsenic. Servants died from inhaling what nobles wore with pride. A duchess's towering wig, adorned with ships or birds, gleamed with fashion and lice, pomade and poison. Beneath it, her scalp festered. Then came the Victorian age, with corsets crushing ribs, fainting couches waiting like stage props, belladonna drops widening pupils into blindness, and arsenic wafers nibbled like candy. Women reclined pale and delicate, their fragility admired, their illnesses applauded as refinement. They sipped Fowler's solution, a glass of arsenic in water, smiling at their porcelain reflections while their organs collapsed. Hollywood followed with its own shimmering mask. Pancake makeup smothered stars' skin for technicolor perfection. Platinum blondes burned scalps with bleach. Actresses lost hair to harsh dyes, and mascara blinded women with coal tar chemicals. Lipsticks gleamed scarlet with cadmium pigments, perfumes masked with phthalates. Stars looked immortal on screen while off-camera they battled rashes, infections, baldness. Fans copied them, unaware the glamour was painted with chemicals no less dangerous than arsenic powders of old. And then, the modern era, where poisons didn't vanish, but wore new names. Nail polishes still carried the toxic trio. Skin lightening creams still hid mercury in secret. Hair relaxers burned scalps, linked to cancers. Perfumes concealed chemicals under the shield of fragrance. Products boasted scientific miracles with jargon as seductive as Venetian merchants once bragging of ceruse. In Lagos or Manila, women bought creams that whitened skin and poisoned kidneys. In São Paulo salons, keratin treatment smoked with formaldehyde. In New York, nail salons, immigrant workers breathed solvent clouds, so customers could leave polished. Everywhere beauty remained the same: contract, admiration now, consequences later. And now you exhale, after all these centuries, after every painted cheek and powdered wig, after every glowing jar and glittering ad, the pattern stands clear. Beauty has always been a mask, sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively. But here at the close of the story, the pace slows. You look back at the alabaster jars of Egypt, the silver mirrors of Rome, the rouge pots of Paris, the radium creams of New York. You see them lined up like ghosts